Are you interested in forming an LLC for your online businesses or business? Today I'm going to share with you 4 tips to know how and when you need to form an LLC as a holding company for your online businesses. Let's do it. Hi, my name is Jim Hart. I'm the founding attorney here at Hawthorn Law, and we help small businesses and online entrepreneurs to get their legal house in order so that they can do something that truly matters in the world. And today I'm here to share with you 4 tips that you need to know about to determine when and how you should form an LLC as a holding company for your online businesses. And I have to say, I'm really excited about today's video because a lot of you in prior videos have asked me about whether or not I could use a whiteboard. You're in for a treat today because I am going to be using a whiteboard as well. We're going to test this out. We're going to see if it works. I think it'll work, but anyway, we're going to do that today. And before we go any further, just remember, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, click the bell thingy, and like the video if you like what I'm talking about. Today's question comes actually from a viewer. And today it's from Miles. He says, could you create a video discussing how to set up a holding company? I have a few side hustles that generate income. I want to expand what I'm doing, so I'm interested in learning how I would approach that. I've read that setting up a holding company to house the other businesses is a good strategy in terms of legal protection and for filing taxes. I've also read that it's a better idea to form the holding company prior to creating the other LLCs or whatever structure if possible. I'm not sure what's legit and what's nonsense. Could you broach that topic in a video? Any guidance or common practices as a starting point would be appreciated. Thank you, Miles, for the question. I appreciate it. I'm going to try and answer that as best I can. I'm going to start by first discussing what an Umbrella LLC, also called a holding company LLC, is. Then we're going to talk about the main benefits of forming an LLC as a holding company for your online businesses. We'll touch a little bit on the downsides of forming multiple LLCs and what can happen if you do that, because it's not for everyone, I'll be honest, but we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to finish up by talking about when is the best time to form an LLC as a holding company to house all your multiple businesses. Are you with me on that? All right, let's jump over to the whiteboard. I'm going to test this out. Let's do it.
Okay, so when we're talking about an LLC, what we're really talking about here is an Umbrella LLC. So I know a lot of you have been asking for a whiteboard, so we're just going to do this is LL. I'm going to get used to this here. This is the first time I've ever done this, the whiteboard, so it's kind of cool. So this is going to be LL number 1. This is going to be what we call the Umbrella LLC. And so we'll put a box around that. And this is going to be, this LLC right here is going to own all the other LLCs. So let's say you've got 2 other brands that you want to own. So this is going to be LLC number 2. And this is going to be LLC number 3. Okay, so this LLC is actually going to own this LLC, and it's going to own this LLC. And so what you're going to do is you'll form this LLC first, and then you can form these LLCs next. And that's basically what an Umbrella LLC is. So the member of this LLC is going to be LLC number 1, and the member of this LLC is going to be LLC number 1. And there's all sorts of other complicated strategies that can be used, but this is the basic idea when we're talking about what is an Umbrella LLC.
All right, now we're going to jump into number 2, which is the main benefits of forming an LLC as a holding company for your online businesses. And there's really 2 main benefits that we're going to talk about here today. And those are liability protection and tax benefits. So let's start with the first one, liability protection. The basic idea here is, and a good example of this is if you own rental real estate. And a lot of people, if I've had clients that own multiple rental properties. And if you own more than one rental property, then generally speaking, you're going to form a separate LLC, and also these can be called series LLCs, for each of the rental properties you own. And the reason for that is, let's say somebody gets injured, or maybe you rent to college students and they have a party and somebody gets hurt, and that happens in one of your rental properties. If you've got all the rental properties in the same LLC and somebody sues you for what happened with one rental property, then all the other rental properties can be basically attached to a judgment, so they're not protected from liability there. But if you put one rental property in one LLC and another rental property in another LLC and another rental property in another LLC, then if somebody sues one of those LLCs because they got hurt in that rental property, they can't get at the other 2 or 3 or 4 or however many rental properties you have, because there's a shield of protection in place there. I mean, we're assuming you're not doing anything to pierce the corporate veil. We've talked about that in a prior video. But as long as you're not doing that, then your liability is limited to what's in that LLC. And the same is true for your online business. So if you've got multiple businesses that you're operating under one single holding company, the example I like to use is Pat Flynn, because he's got a number of businesses now that he's running under the Smart Passive Income brand. He's got this Switch Pod, and he's got his Smart Podcast Player, and he's got his general affiliate and revenue that he makes. So I don't know what his legal structure is, because I'm not affiliated with him at all. Chances are, I suspect, he probably has a lawyer, and he probably has different LLCs, maybe not. Pat, if you're watching this and you want to reach out, I'm happy to help you. The idea being that you would have a different LLC for each of those unique businesses, because if something were to happen with the Switch Pod Player, maybe knock yourself over the head with your Switch Pod Player. It's not a Switch Pod Player, it's the Switch Pod. Switch Pod. He's got the Smart Podcast Player, not to get those confused. Anyway, if you were to knock yourself over the head with the Switch Pod, or maybe it swings around and you jam your knuckles or something, I don't know how you could get injured using that. But if you did get injured using that, then you can't sue him with the Smart Podcast Player, if that makes sense. And so if you've got a business, if you've got an online business and you have, you're making some affiliate revenue here, and perhaps you've got some courses here, and maybe you've got some other digital products here that you're selling, or maybe you've got an e-commerce business over here, you would want to separate all those out into different LLCs. That way, if somebody sues you for something related to the affiliate business, they're not also going to be able to get at your e-commerce revenue from that business. Does that make sense? Thumbs up if you think that makes sense. Click the little like button, or comment below and say, I'm getting this. That would help me. Sometimes it's hard when you're making these videos. You don't know if anyone's really getting what you're saying or not. So that's the first main benefit of forming the LLCs under one holding company. The second benefit is tax protection and the tax liability. I'm going to jump back to the whiteboard here for a second.
So one of the nice things about an LLC is that it doesn't have to file its own tax return unless you elect to be taxed as an S corporation, or I'll write these down. So if you elect to be if you do an S corp, or if you have partners, you need to file your own tax return for the LLC. But if you don't have those, then this is just going to go on your 1040. And the way this will work is, if you have multiple LLCs that this LLC owns, then the income from those LLCs are going to flow through to the parent LLC. And so what that means is that whatever income this makes, the taxes on that are going to flow through to that LLC and that LLC. So then what you'll have is the profit from this LLC. You basically have profit, and that's going to go onto your 1040, onto Schedule C, I believe. I'll correct that if I'm wrong, but I believe that's correct. And so that's how the taxings work for LLCs. So if you've got multiple LLCs, it's all going to flow through to your parent LLC. Now, there's a lot of nuances to this, and this is a gross oversimplification of the way this works, but in general, that's what you need to know, is it makes it very easy for tax reasons. Now, you're still going to want to have a separate accounting program or software for this, and a separate accounting for this that can flow through that. Or at least, if not a separate, you don't necessarily need a separate program, but you're going to want separate accounts, bank accounts, for each of these LLCs to keep everything separate. and that's good, and then you'll be good with that. So that's the tax benefit to having the umbrella LLC, is you can have everything in one. And if you formed another LLC, can you tell I like using this whiteboard? If you had another LLC, again, the income just flows directly to that. So you're good to go.
All right, so there you have the two main benefits of forming an LLC as a holding company. You got the tax protection and the liability protection. Now, let's talk about some of the downsides of forming an LLC as a holding company for your online businesses. The first main downside is that it's expensive, right? You're going to have to pay a lot of money to keep up all these LLCs on an annual basis. If you live in like California, where the annual filing fee is I think around $800, then you'd have to pay that fee for each one of your businesses. And so that is the first main drawback, is it is expensive to maintain all these businesses. You're also going to have a registered agent for each of these businesses, and there could be other just corporate fees and things associated with them. So you just want to make sure that you understand going in what all the costs are going to be to setting up these LLCs. It's a lot easier if you only have one LLC, because you only have to pay one annual fee and one registered agent fee, and you only have to set up one. But when you're doing multiple LLCs, it can get a little bit more expensive. So that's the number one drawback. And the second downside I've already kind of touched on is you would need to actually hire a registered agent for each one of the LLCs. It's not enough to just have an LLC or a registered agent for the Umbrella LLC. You also need to have one. If you've got an umbrella, you're going to have at least 2 more LLCs underneath it, possibly 3, and you're going to need to have a registered agent for each of those. And typically the fees for that are between $100 to $150 a year. A lot of times it could be $99 for the first year, but then it goes up in the second year. That's the way we do it. And so, that's just another fee that's going to get tacked onto all the other fees you're going to have to pay. But, this is the cost of doing business. And if you're running your own online business and you want to do it the right way, these are the things that you're going to need to be aware of and that you're going to need to pay for if you want to do it correctly. All right, the third downside is that there's just going to be a lot of paperwork to keep track of. Here in my office, we do things mostly paperless, and that's what I would encourage you to do too. So create a good system for how you're going to organize all your documents. A good filing structure, you should have it all in one centralized location, whether that be on Dropbox or Box or Google Drive, or some people use Evernote. Just make sure you have a good filing structure in place, and you're going to want to have a file for each one of your LLCs with all your articles of organization, with your registered agent paperwork, with all your annual report notices and things like that. And usually, even for me here in North Carolina, we can get most of that information online. I believe that's the case also in Florida. So you don't always necessarily need to have copies of all this in hand, but if you want to, you can have. It's always nice to have a central location where you've got access to all this information. The one exception I would say to that is you definitely want to have a copy of the EIN number paperwork that you receive from the IRS, because they're only going to send that out to you once. If you misplace it, you're going to have to jump through a bunch of hoops to call the IRS and figure out what that number is, but typically they only send that out one time. So always make sure you've got that in a safe place, possibly in multiple places, so you don't lose it. If you use a firm like ours to set that up for you, we'll have copies of that if you ever need to get it. But that's another thing you need to consider if you're forming more than one LLC. More than one LLC means more than one files with paperwork that you need to keep track of and maintain. I think the big thing to take away from all of this is that the more LLCs you have, the more complicated your structure is going to be, and the more likely it is that you're going to need legal help at some point from an attorney to help you organize and figure out exactly what you're trying to do with all of these LLCs. That's again one of the drawbacks. Now, there is an alternative to all of these things. What some people will do is form the Umbrella LLC, and then you can have different DBAs. So for different brands or businesses you're running, you could have a different DBA for each, and that's going to be a lot less expensive. But the drawback to doing it that way is you're not going to get the liability protection that you get with having the multiple LLCs. So that's the biggest, that's one option for people if you're looking at forming an LLC as a holding company and then just having several DBAs underneath that LLC. That is one way to do it. Last but not least, who should form an Umbrella LLC and when should you form that Umbrella LLC? Generally speaking, I would say you're ready to form an Umbrella LLC if you are a business that's big enough where you have 2 distinct businesses that have their own revenue streams and their own systems and processes, and they're separate and distinct. If that's the case, and they're both operating under the same main holding company, I think it's time to start that holding company as an LLC and the two main businesses as part of that. And this is really important if you are actually forming, if you're thinking about getting acquired, or maybe you want to spin off one of your brands at some point, then you definitely want to have two separate LLCs at a minimum to house each of those brands, or maybe more. Hold on a second. Who saw my coffee mug up there that knew that I was going to do this at some point? College football playoff, baby. Should have been number one. We got robbed. We'll leave that right there for you. If you don't like Ohio State, no, that's fine. I can still be your friend. So other people that would be great to, or other businesses that would be in a really good spot to form a separate LLC or an umbrella LLC would be businesses that are looking to basically create another business, but they want to fund it with revenue from your existing business. That might be a good way to do that second business, is to start it as a separate LLC. And I know I've talked about this in the past. There are reasons why at this point Hawthorn Law is just part of my main law firm. In the future, I am considering actually Hawthorn Law as a separate entity and making it its own LLC moving forward. So that's something you want to think about. So if you're running a business and you're kind of starting another little side business where it's starting to get some traction and generate some revenue, you might want to use money from your existing business to fund that business and help it grow. And that's another way to do it, and you would want to have that be a separate LLC. And I would say the last example of someone who might want to form an umbrella LLC is any online business owner or coach or course creator or anyone like that who they have multiple profit centers in their business that each generate revenue for the main hub of your business. And so you can identify and say, okay, yes, like I talked about before, you've got, an affiliate profit center that generates money through affiliate sales. You've got, maybe a courses profit center that generates money through courses. And maybe you have another one that's in e-commerce or digital downloads or products like that. So if you have multiple profit centers in your business, then you're getting closer to where you may need to form multiple LLCs. If it's just you and one business right now and you're trying to do a side hustle to generate some additional revenue, you probably just need a regular LLC. But when you start to have multiple revenue streams, then that's when you start thinking about whether you might want to have multiple LLCs and have them all under one parent company. And this is why I tell people, kind of as an aside, this is why I tell people when they ask me this on the phone when we do consults, which should I form first, or what should the name of the LLC be? Does that matter? And it doesn't really matter, because if you look at this long term and you think, well, at some point I want that LLC to become the holding company for my business, then you might want the name of the LLC to be somewhat bland. And you can always change it if you want, but you might want it to be something like, my initials or JWH. So like JWH Holding Company might be the name of a holding company for my businesses. It's not, you can look it up, I don't have that, but something like that might be, or you might want to use the initials of your kids. I've seen this happen a lot with a lot of clients where they do something like that. So initials are a common way to do it. Or if you're a big fan of different movies, sometimes people will use names from derivatives from movies that they like and things like that. I mean, as long as you got to be careful you're not violating any trademark or intellectual property issues, but you can get creative with the way you want to do that. Maybe a nickname you had as a kid or something like that. You can name the holding company anything you want, and you can always create different products and brands, or you can set up a DBA from that LLC as you're operating your business as the DBA. So that is not necessarily a big deal. And like I said, you can always change the name of the LLC later. It can be somewhat of a hassle with changing bank accounts and different things like that. But for privacy reasons, that might be something that you want to do, is set up the LLC as something that's somewhat private and unique to you. And then you can set up a DBA underneath that, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, once again, if you get what I'm saying, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, leave a comment below, and don't forget to hit the little bell thingy so you get notified whenever we post new videos. And also I would appreciate if you could subscribe. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If it has, leave me a comment below. Let me know what questions you have about forming an umbrella LLC. Hopefully this has jogged some ideas in your mind and got you thinking about how you might want to do this, or how you might want to continue to build your business moving forward into 2020. And if you're looking for a checklist to help you when you're forming your LLC, there's a link down below in the description to a checklist that you can download, get on my email list, and get notified whenever I post new videos as well. So that's there to help you out if that's something you're interested in. So if you missed my video on common mistakes people make when forming their LLCs, you definitely want to make sure you check that out here. It's a great video. It's one of my most popular videos on the channel, and hopefully you'll find that helpful so that you know what not to do when you're forming your LLC. Thanks so much. We'll see you in the next video.